like one of the great things about journeying with a giant is it's adventurous. It's taking someone else, calling a friend and saying, I've never done this before. I think God's in it. We'll figure it out together. And it turns into a little exploration, a little time of discovery and adventure. And you have times when you laugh together and all the emotions. So it's just a really living experience that is great to do with other people.
Welcome to the Journey with the Giant podcast. I'm Robert Prince, and I'm so glad you're joining us for this series, inspired by the upcoming book, Journey with the Giant. Choose your guide, pursue your purpose, and grow in your walk with God, by author and spiritual director Lori G. Melton. In this series, we are exploring the unique and life-giving spiritual practice of walking with the giant of the faith. But throughout this series, several people have touched on the topic of walking this journey not only with the giant of the faith, but also walking it with some friends. We had a great conversation with Sister Diane where she mentioned it, and then last week, Julie and Sherry both shared how valuable it was on their journeys to not be walking it alone. And of course, my own journey includes being involved in a group the first year and then leading a group of others through the Journey with the Giant material. So today, we're going to be talking in more detail about why you should invite some friends into this journey with you. We're so glad you're here. Whether you're longing to deepen your walk with God or just curious about what it means to journey with the giant, you are in the right place. Well, Lori, I'm excited about today's episode so that we can dive into experiencing this pilgrimage with others.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is a great topic. This comes up. If we look back, we might see journeying with a group with others in most of our podcast episodes so far.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about this conversation.
I believe there's so much richness in this, and so I'm excited today. And in fact, Lori, I would love to start off this conversation talking about your experience on the Camino just a few short months ago, and really how it was enhanced by being with a group of people instead of just on your own. And I also think it's important to acknowledge that you haven't talked much about your Camino experience publicly yet. And I know you're still processing it, but I'm wondering if sharing even a little bit today, especially around how your group shaped the experience, might help frame this conversation about community and walking together.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's a great question. The Camino, it was interesting to me because I'm a solitude person. I love solitude, silence. And so for me, there was a ton of people on the Camino that came individually. I would guess, even if people are married, it was probably 60 to 70% individuals on the Camino.
Okay.
But for us, my husband went along, and also my son and daughter-in-law came with us. And that kind of just organically came together. And what it did for me was it brought me to a place where my receiving was enhanced by being with these three other people. God had growth areas for me. At times I would be like, Lord, I want to be alone, And the Lord was like, I am doing something different in you and deeper than what I would orchestrate for myself. And it tied back to a thread the Lord's been weaving in my life for probably 15 or 20 years, where I've been I used to be a largely individualistic faith person. I was involved in church, but I really didn't think I needed other people in my spiritual life. I thought, I have God. I know how to hear God. So do I really need other people? And God really brought me to a point where he said, think about that. You don't think you do. And I was like, you're right. But you know what? You say that I do. And that we are all enhanced by the body. We cannot become what we are called to be. We cannot. It's impossible. It's not optional. It's not, no, maybe I could be. It's, I cannot become what I am meant to be unless I'm connected to all the other parts. So going on the Camino with my small group, my husband and my kids, was better because I was with them.
Yeah. Well, and I even remember, I can't imagine being there with family close like that. But also, I remember even just a few stories about, even though you were walking the journey alone, and even though maybe Brian, your husband, or your kids were at
Yes.
different points of the journey, a little bit ahead or a little bit behind. You also experiencing the journey in new ways, even because of the people on the journey with you, even though you didn't know
Mm-hmm.
them prior to the
Mm-hmm.
trip. So I'm wondering if you might be able to speak into that just a moment, even these
Oh,
people you meet along the journey.
oh my gosh. Um, People will tell you about the Camino, and this is true in life, and this is true in our spiritual growth, that it's all about the people on the trail. You think you're going for a lot of reasons, and probably the biggest reason is for the people that you will meet that you don't even know yet. And we met people from all over the world every single day, people that were hungry to grow or to become. Everybody had a different theology about what that looked like, um, which was also very intriguing and inspired a lot of prayer and growth in us. So the people were the journey. They
Yeah.
were the greatest aspect of the Camino.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You really, what I really hear you saying there also is that it's really encouraging to see the body of Christ come together in a shared experience, even though they're all individual experiences also, but also having an experience with the divine, with God, in a way
Hmm.
that they couldn't do it otherwise, both because they're on their journey, but also because they're meeting people they would never otherwise meet.
Hmm. Oh
And it was
yeah.
just a
We
beautiful experience of the body of Christ.
yeah. And what we're meant to receive, what we were meant to receive on the Camino, every day you would wake up and say, "What? Who might I meet today that would have a piece of what God has for me on my journey? And who might I have something to share a little piece? Not that we're each other's answers, we're not, but we do have gifts. Everyone has gifts to give one another, and so
Yeah.
just having that awareness." That's a great awareness to bring back into everyday life, not just on the Camino when I'm meeting people from all these countries all over the world, but every day,
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. That's very cool. You know what you're talking about there really reminds me of Julie and Sherry and the way you journeyed with them and y'all journeyed with each other. Y'all became Abba sisters, as you said in that episode last week. You gave each other spiritual language, you offered presence to each other, right? And you saw things in each other's lives that only a close friend on the journey could see, really.
Yes. And it was like walking a pilgrimage together. Julie, Sherry, and I walking with our giants and walking the trail of our lives, of our lives. And sometimes we were together on Zooms doing that, and sometimes we were separated, in our individual lives. And then we would come back together and talk about what we'd seen that day. So it does kind of remind you of pilgrimage, and pilgrimage runs all through the book. There's a thread of pilgrimage, that idea that we are walking our life's pilgrimage from the time we're born until the time we pass on to heaven, and the
Mhm.
spiritual friendships that we have and the giants that have gone before us are all a part of our pilgrimage. So yeah,
Yeah.
I very much look at my life as that pilgrimage, and the people in my life as other people on the trail.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm reminded too of when um, you shared, and of course, Julie and Sherry shared this as well, um, that the small group allowed you not just to learn from your own giant, but you also learned
Hmm.
from each other's giant. And especially, I think you talked about a time, or they talked about a time rather, of that retreat you were going on and those in between moments, even between meetings, where you were seeing each other and talking with each other, the
Hmm.
things you were
Hmm.
learning from your giant came to influence bigger pieces of your relationship with each other rather than just the group in the
Hmm.
moment you were
Hmm.
in that group meeting, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. We went on a retreat together. We retreat together. When Sherry lived close by us, we would go on retreat probably twice a year together.
Okay.
And while we were walking with our giants, and Sherry was walking with Evelyn Underhill, and she would share with us in our monthly Zooms about Evelyn's practice of adoring prayer. And she would talk about how deeply God was working that in her own life, and how it was drawing her to God. So when we went on retreat together, we had our times alone with God. And then when we came together, we had asked Sherry ahead of time, would you teach us how to do adoring prayer by what you've learned. And so during that retreat, she used what she learned from her giant, that when she shared it with us, made us thirsty to learn it. And then when we were together, she led us and taught us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and I remember one of the things Sister Diane talked about in her episode was you'd asked her about how is this different from studying together, like learning a book, like in a classroom setting versus walking a journey together. And what you're really talking about, and you're mentioning it even now, is how spiritual friendships form, right? I mentioned the concept of anamkara, that spiritual friendships or soul friends.
Yeah.
And those spiritual friendships really are forming that make this practice so much richer, even maybe with people that you just start the journey with. Let's say, because when you invited me into the group the very first time, I didn't know any of those people. I take that back. I knew you and I knew Kirsten from the
A
Writers
little.
Conference,
Yeah, just a
just
little.
barely,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
still, the friendship that formed out of that helped that
Mm-hmm.
practice of walking with the giant become so much richer. And that's
Yeah,
really what you're
yeah.
talking about.
And I think with friends, that maybe you haven't crossed that into that part of your life, the spiritual part of your life, but you know that you both have relationships with Jesus and you want to grow. This is a great way to deepen that friendship so that you are able to talk about the deep parts of your spiritual life and what God's doing in your life. This would give you a format to do that, where you can
Yeah.
grow spiritually. And then whether you're walking with a giant after your journey with a giant time, you still have that spiritual depth together where you could talk about what God's doing or where you're challenged or questions you
Mm.
have or what you're receiving from scripture or any part of your spiritual life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love what you mentioned there, Lori, about going deeper with friends and how journeying with the giant may allow us to go deeper in our friendships, especially spiritually, because we're living in such a time of division. Even
Mm.
people who go to church together, even people who may be in the same small group,
Mhm.
and they haven't explored their beliefs in a deep enough way to know where each other stand. But then
Mm.
sometimes we can get caught up in certain beliefs and not have compassion, like where we disagree, and not have
Mm.
compassion on and understand where people are coming from. And I
Mhm.
believe, as what we've seen with so many of the people we've talked to, both on this series, but the way you've journeyed with people individually
Mhm.
through groups, this
Mhm.
book can really bring such depth into our spiritual lives because everybody's journeying with a different giant and bringing
Mhm.
out different aspects that we can set with. And as I see things in you that I might disagree with, I can
Mhm.
understand them with more compassion, more empathy, and really through a different lens than just say,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, how can you believe that? But I
Yes,
can really
yes.
understand it from a more heartfelt way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Remember when we interviewed Stacy about Calvin and how
Mm,
she talked about
yeah,
Calvin and how different his theology was than
exactly.
hers, and how she grew as a person, but that also brings up those topics in your,
Mm,
say you had a journey group and there's a giant from way back then who has a different theology or maybe is
mhm.
going through a rough, tumultuous political time. What if those conversations, what if talking about your giant and the tumultuous times they're going through could gently bring up where we're at and how it's
Yeah,
so hard to integrate together and have those conversations?
yeah.
Um, I think that's a huge part. I mean, when I studied Francis, I remember really being surprised that during his lifetime, the church that he was a part of was going through horrendous um,
Mhm, mhm.
dishonesty. There was big time issues in the church that he was a part of, and
Yeah.
yet he chose to stay. He chose to stay as that a part of that as a part of that church and to submit to the leadership in that
Mhm.
church. And I went, wow,
Wow.
that
Wow.
is really an interesting thought because in our culture, we would run or we,
Yeah.
we would leave. We would not put up with that, right or wrong. But it
Yeah.
does bring up those points that we can talk
Yeah.
through. It's a
Yeah.
great way to bring those things up.
Yeah, I think so. And it feels like a safer space even than just having
Hmm.
conversations over coffee in a public place, maybe, or
Right.
something.
Or about what you think.
Hmm.
versus what Calvin thinks.
Ah,
Like,
yes.
or
Right.
Francis looked at it this way. It's kind of like instead of just head on hitting
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
more bringing them up from that sideways context.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does.
I love that.
It does. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah. Well, and there's so many more things I want to talk about, but you and I've talked specifically about how the book is already really set up to encourage group discussion. And so I just want to go ahead and dive into that real quick because people think,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't want to lead a small group. I don't want to put in all this
Yeah.
extra work and do this stuff or do that stuff or send invites out.
Mm-hmm.
But really what we're talking about is really almost like a book discussion, right? Like I have
Yeah.
my book and I'm doing my own work with my own giant, and you've given
Yeah.
lots of questions and lots of times to reflect and um,
Mm-hmm.
things to really decide how we're walking our journey and how our giant is impacting us. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really just about sharing some of those takeaways with other people in your life. And they're going to
Yep.
do the same thing with you, right? So, can you talk
Yeah.
into that just a little bit about how this book can help us just really have a
Yeah.
book discussion? We don't want people to think they have to
Yeah.
do all this big leadership responsibility and dive into
Yeah.
preparation and all of that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, the book is set up where each person is individually has their own walk and it's divided into months. So if you're meeting once a month with your group, easily you could just say, let's just we all read this month. Let's just come together and I mean, with Julie and Sherry,
Mm,
we had no curriculum, we had no book. All we
yeah.
did was come together and we had taken notes during the month on what we had been reading, quotes that had stuck out to us, things that had happened with
Yeah.
with our giant that month. And we just got together on the call and we each shared what happened. And we just took turns. So
Yeah.
now to have the book along, you would also have like, okay, month one, what stood out to you guys? Was there a prompt? Every chapter is a month, and every month has a weekly article with a question at the end of that article. So in a group discussion, it could be as simple as people just looking at those prompts and saying, you know, as we're talking about our overall journey with a giant, is there one of those prompts that stood out to you? Or
Yeah.
is there a quote that stirred you? Or, I mean, no one would, there's very little leadership needed. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll be designing a simple book discussion guide to go
Yeah.
along with for people just to have for reference if they're thinking
Yeah.
about doing it with others. But you could simply do it like what you're saying, just
Yeah.
thinking about a couple friends, passing along the sneak peek or the introduction chapter one download and saying, hey, just read this, and if it's intriguing to you, I thought maybe we could do this together. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think, Julie even admitted during her episode, that she might have quit had she been trying to
Yes.
do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing people were waiting for her, in her own words, kept her engaged in
Mm-hmm.
the process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I
Yeah.
think it's important to have that. We hate this word nowadays. I feel like it's important to
Yes.
have that accountability,
I know what you're
if
going
you
to
will.
say. Yes. I know
Yeah.
what you're going to say.
But it
Yeah.
does help us stay engaged
Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
people.
I mean, with you, and even then when you came to me in the fall of the first year that you journeyed with a giant and said,
Hmm.
hey, I'm thinking about leading a group. Why? Why was that a stirring in your life versus I just finished my journey. This was great. I'll keep going. I'll pick up a giant on my own next year or whenever.
Yeah.
But yeah, why was that stirring?
Well, that's a great question, and it exactly speaks to what Julie was saying. It's because I knew I wouldn't walk alone the same way I would walk with people. I knew I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't stay nearly as engaged if I chose to do it on my own. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I wanted to invite people into this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of a secondary reason. Probably the primary reason was so that I would stay engaged with my own spiritual giant in more ways.
Right.
So yeah,
Yes.
that's a
Yes.
great question, because that exactly speaks into one of the primary reasons I decided
Mm-hmm.
to invite people
Yeah.
into a group that second year.
Yeah. Well, I know even when I went on my first silent retreat, I went on a silent retreat with Dominican Center. It was one of the most profound intimacy building relationship with God experiences I ever had. And as I was driving home from that retreat, thinking and praying about what had happened, and I just said, Lord, I want to do this every year, God willing. This is just, I've never known about this before, the depth that I could, the time and the, so I was driving home, I thought of that. And the next year when I went to go on retreat, I thought, who can I invite? I, other people have to know about this. They have to
Yeah.
taste this. You know,
Yeah.
they have to, I want people to experience what I just experienced because I know this is the same God who just visited me in this through this practice. And I
Mhm.
think it's the same with Journey with the Giant, where I mean, that was the whole emphasis of why I wanted to write the book, was because it was such a beautiful, powerful practice that I hadn't known of before. And people had started
Mhm.
asking me, what is this? Show me how to do it. And I was like, oh yes, let
Yeah.
me let me put this in a format where you can taste what this is.
Mhm.
Because you're gonna love it. God is in
Yeah.
this, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and I think that really speaks to really the idea that transformation multiplies in community, right?
Hmm.
Because the way I'm being transformed with my giant is going to impact you, is going to impact the 3, 4 other people. But
Yeah.
that transformation is going to multiply in that community because what's happening in me with my giant as I'm learning, and I'll just
Hmm.
say, as my giant is discipling me, I'm
Hmm.
then able to pass that discipleship along with the friends that I'm walking with. And it
Hmm.
really take
Hmm.
hold in them in new ways because it's happening through story. Jesus taught in
Hmm.
stories because that's how we learn the
Hmm.
best, right? And
Yes.
so I believe that transformation. In fact, Sister Diane even talked about that in one of her episodes about how what one person learns ripples out to other people.
Mm. Hmm.
And so I love the exponential fruit, right? How that fruit is multiplied,
Yeah.
and how
Hmm.
one person's journey can bless so many others.
Yeah, yeah. And if you were experiencing that on your own, um, you could share it when you go visit with someone over coffee, and you could share it and it would have an impact. But
Mhm,
like you said, it's multiplied when we're sharing this together. I
mhm.
remember when Julie was walking with Harriet Tubman, and there's so much to Harriet's story about hearing the voice of God and being courageous to step out. And Julie was being called to step out. I was being called to step out. Sherry was being called to step away, like follow God's
Wow.
command to step away.
Yeah.
And so Harriet, the quotes and the experiences that Julie shared about Harriet were strengthening. Like I went away from those meetings with strength for what God was calling me to. And I would think
Yeah.
about Harriet and how courageous she was.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
and what you're talking about there also is speaking to kind of shared discernment, right? The things
Hmm.
she shared helped you in your discernment process, even in where you were and the steps you were getting ready to take.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Hmm.
And I think even Sister Diane, many people have talked about this, but Sister Diane also talked about that, especially with her students, right? When her students journey with the giant in community, they notice things in each other's writings and their experiences that they may have never noticed alone. And I think
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about there, right? Sometimes friends can just see the Holy Spirit's work in our lives before we do, and sometimes better than we
Yes.
do.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's why I love verbally processing things because even as I'm saying something, I've done this several times over the last few weeks. I've started to say something and articulate a thought, and I'm like, wow, this feels like a new revelation,
Mm.
as I'm
Hmm.
saying
Yes.
it. And so, and I
Yep.
think that's so true in in walking with a giant of the faith in a
Yeah.
group or with another friend or two
Yes,
as
it
well.
is. You're right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things then that I really want us to talk about is how this really creates a safe space. Walking with some friends really
Hmm.
creates a safe space for vulnerability and risk, not only like discovering each other's true beliefs and
Mm.
having compassion with
Mm.
them and being okay in those moments of knowing we may not agree totally, like Stacy and John
Yes.
Calvin. Stacy did not agree with
Yes.
John Calvin by any means, but
Hmm.
how that creates a safe space to honor our fears, right? And talk about those more openly,
Yeah.
wondering if walking with the giant, and Sherry even shared this, and we both have also about would this pull me away from Jesus? Would it pull me
Yeah.
away from the community that I hold,
Mm-hmm.
dear,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
help change my beliefs? And I think we're so afraid of exploring, like me, I was afraid of exploring Celtic Christianity, of Celtic
Yeah.
spirituality,
I was just gonna
right?
say that. Yes, you should talk about this. Like, how did walking with John O'Donohue give you a space to talk about the desires that you had to learn about Celtic
Mm.
Christianity, and then give you a space to talk about it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think first off, there was courage. Like you gave me courage, just helping to discern who I was going to walk with. You helped speak into that and provide some courage just as one on one. But then as I stepped into the group, knowing some of the other people's backgrounds and who they were walking with, and it let me get to know fairly quickly how grounded they were in their faith, you know, and to
Mm-hmm.
help me realize that these people are going to let me know if I'm going down, to use Stacy's words,
Yes.
a woo woo path, getting a little
Right.
too woo woo in Celtic
Yes.
Christianity or Celtic spirituality. And because that was a concern of mine, right? I mentioned that
Yeah.
mystical Christianity, or the mystical
Mm-hmm.
side of faith, to me meant like Doctor Strange from the Marvel comics. That was my
Yeah.
idea of the mystic. And it helped me explore it in a safe space, knowing that I was walking alongside people that would help give me some feedback, that would provide some guardrails. In fact, one of our guests mentioned having some guardrails maybe in
Yeah.
place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think walking with the group helped with that, helped me to know that I
Mm-hmm.
was going to be safe, not only in exploring this, but that I wasn't going to get too far outside the lines of what I truly believed, or if it wasn't going to suck me to one side or the other in a
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
that took me away from my core beliefs,
Yeah.
outside the bounds, if you will. It wasn't going to
Yeah.
let me go out of bounds, if you will.
Right. Yeah. And it gave you the place. You ever notice that if someone says, don't do that, don't look there, don't explore that, it's like, all I want to do is just see what's over there, you know?
Yeah.
So, when we're boxed in by don't do this, don't go there, as far as what we're curious about in our faith,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, it doesn't answer the desire. It doesn't,
Yeah.
we continue to bring our desires to God. But what it did was it
Hmm.
gave you a safe space to be like, I'm just reading about John O'Donohue. It's not that I'm not really going over there. I'm just learning about him and his Celtic faith. Um,
Yeah.
so it did give you like an enclosure of people around you where maybe if you still even had some like, I'm a little scared of getting off here,
Yeah.
but I can explore this while I'm with these people, and then go from there, like that they
Yeah.
will keep me safe if I need to be kept safe. And if it's a good
Yeah.
place, I just was able to cross over and
Hmm.
receive from that area of faith.
Right. Well, and I think you mentioned it probably in your episode, and you definitely have mentioned it through the years that I've known you, is just sometimes
Mm-hmm.
just praying and letting the Holy Spirit guide us, right? Knowing
Mm-hmm.
that He's here to protect us. Our hearts are pure, our motives are pure. We want to walk into deeper relationship with Christ. That's why we're
Mm-hmm.
exploring some of these other giants and
Yeah.
walking with them for a year, and just
Mm-hmm.
trusting that God's going to honor that and
Yes.
keep us safe, and keep us tuned in and sensitive to his nudge to know, ooh, that's not quite what I have for you there.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I know when I was walking with Mr. Rogers, I ended up at another denomination's retreat, like a serious, like in the
Mm,
depths of that retreat with those beliefs, with those practices, and I about flipped out.
uh-huh.
But Mr. Rogers was so multifaceted in his openness to other faiths that it
Yeah.
really grounded me at that point. Another time during my walk with Mr. Rogers, I ended up at a Native American site, and there
Okay.
was a Native American dance going on, and I the immediate reaction was fear.
Mm,
Um, but I was grounded again by going, I don't remember Mr. Rogers being afraid or running or closing. I remember an episode where he actually featured Native American headdress and a vest and the moccasins, and he talked about the family structure of Native Americans. And
yeah.
just so, having walked with him, it went, you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to
Yeah.
be afraid. And it was really
Yeah.
cool. It broadened my love and respect for different people. And that's what I
Hmm.
want. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I don't want to be afraid and closed and, I don't. So,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
wasn't
It
farther
really.
away from Jesus. When I wasn't farther away, I was closer.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. If anything, it drew you closer to Jesus because you were dependent on him to help you through that
Mhm.
fear and to help you step into those places where you can see the beauty of what God is doing, through
Yeah.
those moments and through those
Yes.
people. That
Hmm.
may be quite different from your belief.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yep. It didn't
that's so
suck me.
good.
It
Yeah.
doesn't take us beyond our will into a new area that we don't want to
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
but we just get that little exposure and
Yeah.
appreciation,
That's
and that's a
beautiful.
good
Yeah.
thing.
I
Hmm.
agree. I agree. Well, as we start to wrap this episode up, is there anything that you just want to say, maybe that we haven't talked about, that you feel like people should know if they're considering doing this, and if they're considering
Hmm.
talking to a friend or two about it? Is there anything you
Hmm.
would just like to share with them as a final thought or something?
Yeah, I would just say it's so simple. It's so
Mm.
simple,
Yeah.
and it's going to be fun. Like, one of the great things about journeying with a giant is it's adventurous.
Mm.
It's it's taking someone else, calling a friend and saying, "I've never done this before. I think God's in it. We'll figure it out together." And it turns into a little exploration, a little time of discovery and adventure. And you have times when you laugh together and all the emotions. So it's just a really living experience that is great to do with other people.
Wow. I love that. I think that is a perfect place to end this episode because that's just great encouragement. It's basically walking with another friend in a sweet space with the Lord.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
friend, if this conversation stirred something in you, maybe you've been feeling a nudge to walk with a giant, or maybe you've already started the journey and now feel prompted to invite someone else into it. Don't wait. The book is Journey with the Giant, and it is the perfect tool to read with a friend or a group. And like Lori said, she's developing a simple small group leader guide. We'll have that linked in the show notes to help you get started. And if you're in need of a physical place to pause and reconnect with God, be sure to visit sanctuary@bearcreek.com. It's Lori and Brian's retreat space in Michigan, offering a peaceful, sacred rhythm that invites you into stillness and spiritual renewal. And wherever you're listening from today, we're so honored you're here. Keep walking, keep listening, and keep inviting others into the journey. Have a great day, friends.